Happy Paul Skeens Day, everybody. Probably can't pick him up in your league, but we've got 20 or more other players here for you on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hello and welcome, everybody, to the Saturday FAAB edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Erik Halterman here, joined by Ryan Boyer on Paul Skeens Day. Ryan, we got the first start from the most anticipated pitching prospect in over a decade, most anticipated since Steven Strasburg seems to be the conventional wisdom here. Although I saw somebody try to claim Shohei Ohtani technically is a pitcher and sort of was a prospect. But you know what? We'll say most anticipated since Steven Strasburg. What did you think of his first outing? He only threw 4 innings, but other than that, everything else pretty excellent.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff looked amazing. Looked as advertised. Line looked pretty good. In the second or third inning, gave up a home run to Nico Horner of all people. Miles Mastroboni got a couple hits off him. I believe his first 2 hits of the season. So a couple little fluky things, but yeah, the stuff looked excellent. Bummer that he couldn't get through 5 and qualify for that win, but I think 75 pitches is the most he threw in a start in the minors. He went a little past that today. So we'll be able to build from there. I'm not sure how consistently deep he'll be with pitching into games. But he did throw, 129 innings or something like that at LSU last year. So he's not like building from ground zero here. So hopefully, as careful as they handled him early on in the season, that they can afford to kind of ramp things up as they go along. But yeah, he definitely looked the part for sure.
Yeah, I think as far as takeaways from this first outing, it would be that everything we thought that was true about Paul Skeens sure seems to be true. He's phenomenally talented. He has no problem retiring major league batters. I suppose technically his ERA has just gone up as we're speaking because one of the inherited runners he allowed must have scored. So as I started this sentence, he had allowed 1 earned run in 4 innings. Technically, it's now up to 2, and I don't actually know if that inning is done. So maybe the storyline will change over the next 10 minutes, but bottom line, 7 strikeouts against 2 walks in 4 innings. That's pretty good. The pitch efficiency, maybe not great, and 84 pitches in 4+ innings means he probably wasn't going to go beyond 5 in this one. And so even if the Pirates didn't have some sort of workload restrictions on him, maybe we won't see a lot of super deep starts because, hey, it takes at least 3 pitches to strike someone out, and he's going to be doing a lot of that. But on the whole, if you expected Paul Skeens, I think you got Paul Skeens today.
Yeah, I'd probably keep the, wins expectations relatively in check. But, I mean, he's going to miss a ton of bats. The stuff, like we mentioned, looks phenomenal. I don't think it's going to have any issues, translating to the major league level. So as advertised, he looked terrific. And I can't imagine he's available in any league, but obviously if he is, pick him up yesterday.
Yeah, I was doing a quick check, and a few of the shallower formats, you might still be able to get him. So obviously go all in for this guy, but certainly in anything 12 team and deeper, would be very surprised if you could still get Paul Skeens anywhere. You make a good point about the likelihood of wins. Just want to compare to Jared Jones, who by many measures has been maybe the best pitcher in baseball this season. Certainly the most surprising in a positive way start. He's got a 2.68 ERA through 8 starts. Can you guess how many wins Jared Jones has?
Just because you asked, I'm going to say 1.
Well, he has twice as many as you thought, but he only has 2. So not great. 2 and 4, despite that 2.68 ERA. And so that's with Jones doing literally everything you could have dreamed of for him. So even if we get the best version of Paul Skeens, I'm right there with you on expecting a low wins total, but expecting plenty of everything else. In less exciting news, we also have the usual dose of injury-related headlines of the past 24 hours or so, including just before we went live, Brandon Nimmo exited with, what was it? Right intercostal irritation. That's the kind of words you get in the first few minutes after he leaves the game. I assume we're going to get something more normal in a couple hours.
Yeah, he initially stayed in the game, took a couple very awkward looking swings. But yeah, Nimmo has been swinging, one of the hottest bats in baseball. So hopefully this is a little fluky thing. He can bounce back quickly from it. But you hear intercostal, you hear oblique, you're automatically worried about a potential IL stint. And that certainly would be the case in this situation. Hopefully it's not, but we'll see. Like you said, probably more information after the game. DJ Stewart, I guess, would probably take over in left field if they do need an IL stunt. He's been, ironically, it seems like he didn't hit at all, and then once JD Martinez came back, he started to hit a little bit. So they could slide him back in left field. Wouldn't be pretty defensively, but maybe deep leagues he could offer a little offensive punch.
Yeah, for sure. I just needed that pressure from JD Martinez, I guess. Elsewhere in potential oblique-related injury news, there was Seiya Suzuki seemed to be getting checked out by team trainers during that Paul Skeens start. I assume we'll have more info there as well, but he just came back from an oblique-related stint on the IL, so that's potentially worrisome there. More injuries to keep track of. Brian Hayes, he just hit the IL today with a back issue. He actually hadn't played in several days and had been in a bit of a slump. So I guess there's some positive spin here where you could say at least Brian Hayes probably will do better than he was doing recently once he's healthy again, but has not been having a very good year, just a 640 OPS on the season.
Yeah, obviously it depends on your roster situation and league size, but I wouldn't have much of an issue cutting him loose if you need that roster spot. He showed glimpses that the power might be burgeoning late last couple of months. He started hitting some home runs, but that has been completely absent so far this year. I think he was in a 3 for 30 slump before he went in the IL. So I don't think, I took a couple Brian Hayes gambles this spring. I was somewhat optimistic that he might have found something, started lofting the ball a little bit, but I don't think I don't think he stole a single base. Maybe one.
Yeah.
Well, that
0.
He's a guy who's offered stolen bases at an atypical stolen base position. And if he's not giving that and he's not showing any more power, I just don't know that we need to wait around for him.
Yeah, I think I'd agree there. He's talented enough that when he gets dropped, somebody else is probably going to pick him up and may be happy enough with that once he returns. And if this turns out to be a very minimum length stay, maybe dropping him is going to end up being the wrong decision. But I'm right there with you on the fact that he actually just doesn't really have that ceiling you want. And it's a lot easier dropping a guy who doesn't have a high ceiling. If you're dropping a guy with a high floor, which might be what Hayes is, you can find floors. So I think there's something to that for sure. Elsewhere in injury news, Dansby Swanson hit the IL with a knee soreness, is still what it was called on the latest update. So potentially not a long-term one there. I believe see Nico Horner slide over to shortstop. Miles Mastrobuoni got a start at second base today. Not sure if we want Miles Mastrobuoni, though.
Yeah, I don't think so. The knee injury, I guess, had been bothering Swanson for several days. He'd been playing through it, and they decided to go ahead and send him to the IL. But yeah, it does seem like a relatively minor thing. He should be back in 10 days or close to it.
Oh, and I just want to give another Paul Skeens update. His ERA has risen again. He's now given up 3 runs in 4 innings. So another one of his inherited runners have scored. His ERA is all the way up to 6.75. So do you want to retake this entire segment and say he's cooked?
Buy low on Paul Skeens for sure.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe he can add a few more inherited runners, have them score too. Back to the injury news. Brian Wu, he just returned from was it elbow issues? It was never quite a strain, right? It was soreness in that area. So it seemed like maybe he just had a delayed start to the season and he just needed to build up after having some soreness in camp. He came back finally yesterday through 4 1/3, and they were good. 4 1/3, 0 earned runs, 1 hit, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts, but he left with a trainer and is dealing with forearm tightness. And you would have thought that given that arc of his season so far, this is an instant panic, send him back to the IL. Uh-oh, Tommy John surgery's coming. But instead, what we're hearing from the team is, it's not a big deal. It's precaution, and he might actually make his next start. So I don't know what to do about this, but if I had Brian Wu and I have to make a decision on whether I'm starting him next week before we hear anything else more concrete, would you advise keeping him on the bench?
I think so. It was an odd situation. Like they first said that he just tightened up, like waiting along. The offense had like a rally, and he just tightened up, waiting a long time in between innings. I've never heard of I've heard of tightening up, but not your forearm tightening up in between innings. That seems a little odd. Maybe they're being totally truthful. I know he tried to talk them into leaving him in the game as well. So they're certainly showing signals that it's minor, but as you mentioned, a guy coming off an IL stint with an elbow issue, dealing with forearm tightness, that feels like an auto IL situation. I suspect we'll see. He started Friday. His next outing would probably be like Wednesday, Thursday. So his in-between starts bullpen session probably maybe Monday. That's probably when we'll hear more news. So unfortunately, might mean you need to make a decision before then, before we find out more. But I'm with you that I would probably lean towards benching him if you have any other viable options.
Yeah, I think at the very least, unless we hear something concrete tomorrow, I don't know about you, but when I do my pickups, I first set my lineup to figure out what I actually very much need, and then I can think about what I can get as a luxury after that. But when I'm setting my lineups on Sunday in preparation for FAAB, I will have Wu on the bench, and because that way I know that I need at least one more pitcher. I don't want to be in a situation where I have to start Brian Wu this week. And I think you have to prepare for that Sunday, even if the news isn't coming until Monday or Tuesday. One more bit of headlines. This one isn't necessarily a headline in the conventional sense, but 4th straight day off for Jackson Chourio. He's out of the lineup yet again. He has not had the rookie season that anyone has really expected or hoped for. Maybe some have expected some struggles. I guess that's a more fair way of putting it. But along with Wyatt Langford and Jackson Holliday, certainly the big 3 of rookies this year is disappointing. Chourio, if he keeps sitting, sure seems to me like this is what happens right before you send a guy down. I don't really know why you'd keep him on the roster just to have him on the bench. If he's this talented, doesn't he need to keep developing with regular at-bats? I mean, do you think that this is only going in one way, or do you think that we are going to see him start 5 or 6 games next week?
Yeah, I mean, if he sits 2 games in a row, I could see that just giving him like a kind of a little mental break and throwing him back in there. But 4 in a row, that definitely feels like a precursor to him being optioned to the minors. And he got off to a nice little start over the first week or so, but he's been quite bad since then, striking out a lot. The counting stats, he's hit a few home runs, stolen a few bases, but the overall numbers just haven't been that great. I mean, he's 20 years old. I'm sure he'll be fine. But they're prioritizing Jake Bauers over him right now. That seems like a guy that you're about to send down to the minors to try to find his swing again. Brewers will also have, I guess he's still got a ways to go, but Garrett Mitchell will be due back eventually as well. Christian Yelich just came back this week. So Brewers have other outfield options. Joey Weimer, they're saying that knee issue is relatively minor, so he could maybe when he's ready to come off the IL, he'll take Chourio's spot. But something to keep an eye on. I don't know, in redrafts, are you holding on Jackson Chourio? I think I would be okay cutting him loose. It kind of depends on the format and et cetera, but I don't know that I'm waiting around for sure.
Yeah, his little bit of speed does keep his fantasy value from bottoming out, even when he
Yeah.
struggled. 4 homers and 6 steals. It's not like that's special, but that's something, even when he's only hitting 221. So that is something that pushes you towards trying to keep him at least until he's officially sent down. But if he does get officially sent down, and we do think that there's a very legitimate possibility of that, I think that my preference would certainly be to bench him this week and cut him next week. But if I have nobody who's more cuttable, certainly in shallower leagues, if the guy's not playing, and if even when Churio starts playing again and gets hot again, I think it's fair to think about what kind of player is the hot version of Churio this season, right? The peak Churio is going to be outstanding and not someone you're ever going to cut in theory if this all works out. But there's no reason to think that the second half of the season version of Churio is going to be all that close to that guy. So the ceiling may not be as high as you want it to be this year alone. So maybe I'm talking myself into cutting him the more I talk here.
Yeah, and I understand that you're always going to be worried cutting a guy that talented loose that he's going to right the ship and be awesome. But I got to factor in the other risk too, like keeping a guy like that on your roster, especially if it's a shallow-ish league. I mean, you just got to move on at a certain point. That's going to be dead weight on your roster. So there's risk there as well. You don't want to be caught being the guy who cut Jackson Churio and he's winds up being awesome still, but there is risk as well, just keeping him on that roster and him not being useful, certainly.
Yeah, so maybe wait until we see an actual move, but again, would not be surprised. So keep an eye on that one for sure if you are stuck with this version of Jackson Churio. Let's cut to a quick break here, but when we come back, we will come back with our top FAAB buys of the week, including a ton of recent call-ups. But first, this message from Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. And hey, you can use the RotoWire Picks tool for help with that. Just checking out the tool today, the top MLB picks for tonight's games. More than half a total base for Joe Adele. That's interesting. That is against Cole Reagan, so I don't know about that one, but you could look that way. Michael Garcia on the other side, we're going more on 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBI. Interest in there. A whole bunch of tips here on the RotoWire Picks tool. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download the app today and use code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Thank you to Prize Picks for their sponsorship. And now we are back with the top FAAB buys of the week. Ryan, who is your first hitter that you're going to be looking to spend big on this weekend?
Kyle Manzardo. Finally, the Kyle Manzardo era. We've entered this year at AAA, 303, 375, 642, 9 home runs, just a 17.1% strikeout rate at AAA Columbus, 11.7 walk rate. Since he came up with the Guardians, he started 3 of 4 at DH against righties, did sit against the lone lefty they faced. He's been batting lower in the lineup. He went from batting 7th to then 8th to then 9th. So not an ideal setup from that perspective, but Kyle Manzardo is maybe fair to say good, not great power, but I think he's been viewed as one of the better pure hitters in the minors. He's going to get plenty of starts at designated hitter, probably mixing in at first base as well. And they want to give Josh Naylor a little mini break in the DH spot. I don't know that he's a super high ceiling guy because that power is probably a little less than other top prospects, but he can definitely still be a 20+ home run guy and controls the strike zone really well. he has struck out a little bit here in the early going with the Guardians, and I don't know if he's going to be playing versus lefties. So not a perfect situation, but there is potential to move up in that Guardians lineup, I think, for him. So Kyle Manzardo, 23 years old. Never know if they're going to be ready to click right away, but he's certainly worth a pickup. I'm probably going, 8% plus?
That strikes me as pretty fair. I think the issue with Kyle Manzardo is he's going to be rostered in your 15-teamers where he's more interesting. You mentioned his lack of elite power in a 15-teamer. He should do well more than enough overall to be quite an interesting hitter. There's a chance that in a 12-teamer and smaller, a first baseman who doesn't have elite power is less exciting. But I still think 8 for him seems fine. I just think that of the factors I care about with a rookie call-up, I care about past prospect pedigree. I care about a runway to playing time. He's got those. I care about those a whole lot more than I care about 5 games worth of stats. So I think I would still be very much in on Manzardo despite a difficult first week. My first name on the list today is Davis Schneider. He's somebody who was an interesting late round pick during draft season based on the fact that he showed great pop, but a ton of strikeouts in a small sample of 35 games last year. Slugged .603 with a 18% barrel rate, but had a 30% strikeout rate. So pretty classic example of an all or nothing power bat. And it wasn't clear how much he was going to play. Early part of the season, the answer was not very much. Only 3 starts in the Blue Jays' first 10 games. He's playing much more now, and in fact, mostly in left field lately, I guess, with pushing Dalton Varsho into center on some occasions. They've also been using Schneider still at second base some. But point is, they've been wanting to get his bat in the lineup somewhere. He started 11 out of the last 12 games, and he's really doing quite well. He just had a homer in a 3-hit game today, which brings his WRC plus up to 162 on the season. He's cut that strikeout rate a bit too. 26.5% is a totally fine mark for a guy who has very legitimate power. So I think I've seen enough to buy into Davis Schneider. I was already pretty interested in buying in on him. It's just that he didn't have the playing time. If the playing time's there, he's going to keep playing. And he even moved up to leadoff today. I think it was George Springer being out with illness may have been related to that. But it just shows that the Blue Jays really like what they're seeing out of Schneider. And so if the only thing that I really didn't get from him early on was the playing time, and that's there now, I'm pretty interested in Schneider and would want him even in those shallower leagues. Don't think you have to go quite as high, but 4 or 5% probably should do it.
Yeah, I'm good with that. And I think he batted leadoff yesterday as well. I guess that's probably also George Springer related, but certainly something to keep an eye on. Springer's not hit all that well this season, so maybe they'll shake things up and move Schneider to the leadoff spot. Schneider finished with I want to say 1 for 28 stretch at the end of last season, but he still had a OPS over 1,000, which tells you how awesome he was before that. So yeah, he looks like he can hit. I'm not sure about the defense. They seemed scared to play him at second base because they really have no other great options at second base, but they've resisted doing that. So that's why he's seeing a lot of time in left field. But hey,
you're not an Isaiah Kiner-Falefa guy,
or Kevin Biggio, not really.
Yeah.
But yeah, as long as his bat's in the lineup, I'm down for it.
Wanted to mention his mustache too, because we got a comment on it. It is indeed quite good. So maybe throw on an extra $1 for that.
the mustache tax. Ivan Herrera looks like he's going to be playing every day for a while now. Unfortunately, because Wilson Contreras out, it's looking like 10 weeks with a fractured forearm. Got off to a great start. Ivan Herrera, 8-11 OPS, 3 home runs in his first 12 games. He's really slowed down since then. 5-12 OPS, no home runs his last 13 games. He does have 5 hits over his last 3 starts, so maybe he's starting to kind of right the ship again. Really a great year last year at AAA Memphis. 951 OPS, 10 home runs, almost as many walks as strikeouts. Really has hit the ball hard this year. 90.7 average exit velocity, 14% barrel rate. So overall numbers haven't been great, but the expected stats have been better than that. I think the bat is legitimately good, especially for a catcher. They even stuck him in the DH spot a couple times earlier this year. But that was partly due to the fact that the Cardinals offense wasn't doing anything, which they're still not doing anything, by the way, but that's another story. But yeah, I think they like his bat. Gloves, not so much. I believe he's 0 for 20 in trying to catch base stealers so far this season, so that might be getting him pulled some late in games. I know they like Pedro Pages' glove a little bit more, but Herrera can hit, only 23 years old. Good bat to ball skills. I think he'll hit for a respectable average and provide a little pop. So if you're looking for a replacement for Wilson Contreras, or maybe you're still looking for a replacement for Francisco Alvarez, I think Herrera is a good option.
Yeah, Herrera would be good enough to start on many teams, I think, already. I think I'm willing to say that, or certainly he is supposed to be good enough once he develops that bat, and the bat's already there in terms of the underlying numbers, like you're saying. So I think a lot of people will be going for Ivan Herrera, not just the people who lost Wilson Contreras this week. So you'll face some competition there. If you are looking to replace Contreras in a one-catcher league, I've got another option here for you. Shea Langelier has really been on a tear recently. He's got 9 homers in 35 games on the season. Now he's only hitting .212 with a .262 on-base percentage, so this is not a complete player. However, it actually might be kind of a complete player, because look under the hood just a little bit. He's got a 190 BABIP. That is dragging that batting average way down. StatCast gives him an expected batting average of 268. And man, if he was hitting 268 alongside the power he had right now, suddenly we're talking about one of the best catchers around on the offensive side. The big knock on Langelier before was that he struck out way too much. Heading into this season, he had a strikeout rate of 30.5%. He's cut a full 9 ticks off of that. He's down to 21.5%. And he hasn't lost any power to get there. He's actually gained power. His barrel rate has jumped from 13% to 18%. If this show was a couple days earlier, I would have gotten to give you the fun fact that he's second in the league in barrel rate behind only Shohei Ohtani. He's dipped down a little bit. He's now tied for 4th with Cal Raleigh, who actually makes a great example of the type of catcher that Langelier could be. Although now Langelier, again, isn't striking out as much as Raleigh is. So there's really quite a lot to like in what Shea Langelier is showing us this season. I would have him over Herrera in one-catcher leagues, although if you're in a 2-catcher league looking for a replacement, no chance that Langelier is still out there. You might be able to get Herrera.
Yeah, it looks like he's showing legitimate improvement, as you mentioned. And, he wasn't a 0 last year. He still hit for some power, even if the average he was startable in 2-catcher leagues last year. But if he has made some legitimate improvements, and might still be still a little bit early to say that definitively, but certainly showing enough interesting things that he needs to be basically universally rostered. And got another catcher for you, Danny Jansen, back from the IL and looking good at the plate. Coming into today, and I believe he hit another home run today, by the way. 987 OPS, 3 home runs, now 4, and as many walks as strikeouts in his first 16 games since coming off the IL. Came into today starting 6 of the last 7, so now 7 of the last 8. He had batted 5th the last 2 games. Not sure where he hit today, but moving his way up in the Blue Jays lineup. And, Danny Jansen we know the story with Danny Jansen at this point. He gets hurt a lot, but he hits pretty darn well for a catcher, especially when he is on the field. Since 2001, he's got an 817 OPS. If you go over a 162 game average, which that covers about 4 seasons for him, but he averages about 31 home runs over that stretch. So legitimate power. Just need him to stay on the field. He's clearly the preferred option over Alejandro Kirk right now, who just can't get it together. Danny Jansen, I don't know, how would you rank those 3 catchers that we've mentioned? I think my preference, Herrera, I think is pretty clearly at the bottom of those 3. I think I might lean Jansen over Langelier's, but Langelier's maybe if you're looking for a little more power, but I think Jansen might be a little bit better hitter than Langoliers ultimately.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that order. I think that if I were to project the year-end earnings from this point forward, I might actually have Langolier ahead of Jansen because Jansen gets hurt all the time. So in a two-catcher league, I would probably prefer to have Langolier for that reason. But again, these guys are rostered in the two-catcher leagues. In a one-catcher league, I don't really care that Jansen gets hurt because guess what? He's not that much better than the replacement level catcher when healthy because there's some pretty good catchers. So you pick up Danny Jansen, you use him for a month or two, then he gets hurt and you go get the next guy. You get Shea Langolier at that point or whoever's right behind him. So certainly in a one-catcher league, I would go Jansen, then Langolier, then Herrera. And I also wouldn't necessarily go that high on any of them because there probably are going to be multiple options. That's the thing about one-catcher leagues. The catcher, like 10 through 16 or 12 through 18, however it is in the rankings, they're
very
all
little separation.
Fine. Exactly. And so that means for strategic reasons, I might just bid like 3 on Jansen and 2 on Langolier and 1 for Herrera. Although if I was in a league with only Herrera available and I just lost Contreras, maybe I'm going up to 6 on Herrera or something. So I think this is very much league dependent, which is why I don't know if it's even that worth it giving general numbers for those two. But I think we agree on the ordering at the very least. Should we move on to the pitchers? Let's start with Taj Bradley, who is still available in a decent number of shallow leagues because he didn't make his season debut until yesterday while dealing with a pectoral strain, but he looks quite good. He did not get a win because he was outdueled by Clark Schmidt of the Yankees, but on the whole, quite a solid outing. 7 strikeouts, 2 walks, 1 run, 4 hits in 6 innings for Taj Bradley, who last year was either totally fine or really struggled, depending on your preferred stats. If you like ERA, yeah, he struggled, 5.59. That wasn't very good. If you like the ERA estimators, xFIP 383, Sierra 382 for a rookie, totally fine, especially one with a 28% strikeout rate. He combined that with about a league average walk rate. So if he gets a ton of whiffs and doesn't have bad control, that should be an above average starter, and we'll see where he goes from here. That was just in his age 22 season. So I'm very encouraged by Taj Bradley as a talent. There's some risk with any pitcher on the Rays that they could just get jerked around a bit. And theoretically, the good version of Bradley is going to soar above all of that and is just going to be in the rotation the rest of the year. I don't know if I can count on that with any Ray, and that might hold back the bids a tiny bit in these leagues where he's still available. But, man, this is a really good young pitcher who was very high on prospect lists before his debut last year. So if he's out there, I do think you do have to bid, probably double digits to go get him.
Yeah, and something to keep an eye on, too. His velocity was up quite a bit yesterday. I tweeted out after the first couple innings, like his velocity was up like way, way up, like 2.5 on his fastball and like 4 miles an hour on his cutter. And at least 2 on his other pitches as well. That came down a little bit by the end of the start, but it was still up pretty significantly. So something to keep an eye on there. And he was already a bat misser, as you mentioned before that. So if he's added a little more velo, then that's makes him all the more intriguing. My next guy is Gavin Stone, but I should mention, I just noticed on Twitter, Kenta Maeda is going on the IL with a viral illness. And Matt Manning is coming up to take his spot. So I think Matt Manning is someone to keep in mind, probably worthy of being in this section. He's a guy I would be interested in. Looks like he would have 2 starts next week as well. I'm not sure who they would be against, but he's shown some interesting things. So that's a guy to keep in mind as well. It
versus Miami at Arizona.
Ooh, not bad. Yeah. Looks like it's going to be a short-term thing for Maeda, but I mean he's been really, really bad, so maybe they'll kind of slow play his recovery. But yeah, Matt Manning, a guy to keep in mind. But Gavin Stone is next on my list. Maybe dropped after a 6 ERA in his first 4 starts, but since then he's been very good. 20 innings, just 3 runs allowed. Would like to see some more strikeouts, just an 11-3 strikeout to walk rate over that time, but he's also gone 7 innings twice and 6 innings in the other start, and that was against the Braves. So 3 really good starts. We have not, as I mentioned, seen the bat missing ability at the major league level yet, but this is a guy who had a 32.6% strikeout rate in the minors. So that combined with the fact that he's pitching for the Dodgers, I kind of trust them to get more swing and miss out of him. And obviously they're going to support him with plenty of offense. Is he going to have a rotation spot over the long haul? They do have starters that are going to come back eventually. Walker Buehler's back in the rotation now. But I think Stone's definitely going to be in the rotation for at least a while longer. And I think he's got maybe sneaky upside because that strikeout rate is so low now, but I think it has the potential to be more. And I don't think it would take a ton of FAAB to get him. You might be able to get him for 4 or 5.
Yeah. I think he's been sort of bouncing on and off of rosters, or at least of interest levels throughout the season. But hey, he's got more wins than Jared Jones. He's got 3 wins so far this season. He's only pitched deep enough to earn a win 5 times, and he's earned 3 of them because, hey, if you pitch for the Dodgers, that does matter. I will throw out Robert Gasser, who for some reason I called Robert Gosser throughout yesterday's pod. For some reason, that's an A. I don't know what I was thinking, but Robert Gasser, it doesn't necessarily throw gas, but is at least a solid back-end starter and with the potential to be something more. That looks like what we could expect from him going forward. He had a strong debut and is one of the more anticipated prospects. Not quite the very top. This isn't Paul Skeens or Christian Scott level, so I don't think that we're going to have to go that high for him. But the main thing that I wanted to see in his debut was that he did enough that it would seem crazy to send him down, and I think he certainly did that. There was certainly a chance that this was just a spot start, but with Tobias Myers already being sent down and with Gasser throwing 6 shutout innings, only 4 strikeouts, but 0 walks, 2 hits against the Cardinals. Were you watching Gasser up close? Was he just embarrassing some struggling hitters, or was he looking like the real deal?
I watched it off and on. He threw a bunch of really nasty sweepers. That definitely looks like it could be a swing and miss pitch for him. The velo is, good, not great. It's set around like 93, 94. Plenty good enough, especially for a lefty, I think. But he missed a good number of bats in the minors. With you that he's certainly a tier lower than those other pitching prospects, but Brewers have a pretty good pitching factory, I was going to say. I don't know why that word came to my mind, but they do a pretty good job of squeezing the most out of pitchers. So I think Gasser's definitely got some ability for sure.
Can we call it a pitching brewery?
Pitching brewery. There you go.
Yeah, I don't really know how the metaphor works, but we're going to use it anyway. Gasser, sorry about that, Robert, was the 130th prospect on James Anderson's prospect list, just to give some sense. So not elite, but if you filter to just 2024 debuts and then go to pitchers, he's 15th on that list. And a good number of those are guys like Paul Skeens, who you weren't going to be able to pick up, or Jared Jones, who already was on rosters from draft season. And a good number of these guys also are just still down in AA. And if they debut this year, it'll probably be much later. So even if he's theoretically the 15th best rookie pitcher, at least just using this one way of looking at it, he may be, the 4th or 5th best who actually debuts early enough that we want to make big bids on him. So with that in mind, we're going double digits, certainly. The winning bids for Robert Gasser, are we going north of 20%? I mean, Christian Scott was regularly going. I'm thinking in the competitive, in NFBC main events and in the TGFBI and that sort of thing, we saw Christian Scott go 300, 600 even somewhere. So in those sorts of leagues, how much less do you think Gasser's going to be? Are we talking 15%, or do you think that he's going to have to go 20 in some leagues? And this is, again, knowing that he's not on the Christian Scott tier. It's just rookie pitchers, you got to pay up.
Yeah, that's honestly way higher than I had in my head.
Yeah. Okay.
I was thinking more single digits. I wonder if, because there is a little bit of question how many starts he's ultimately going to get, whether that might keep his bids down a little lower. But people are going to look at that line, how good it was in his debut, and they're going to see the strikeout rate in the minors. You might be right. Maybe I'm underselling Robert Gasser, Robert Gasser, whatever you want to call him.
Right. Or maybe what you're saying is you're only going 8 to 10 and someone else is getting him, which is
Yeah.
a fair, I mean, that's a useful thing to say as well.
Yeah. Maybe you should go at that level. And if somebody wants to go higher, then you should probably say, well, good luck.
Yeah. Should we move on to a pair of relievers? Not the clearest reliever options this week. We got a couple on here.
Yeah. This might only wind up being a short-term play, but at least for the next week or so, Daniel Hudson is probably going to be the favorite for saves with the Dodgers. And that's a pretty good team to be saving games for. Evan Phillips is on the IL for at least another week or so with a hamstring injury. Daniel Hudson got their last save, got 2 saves on the season, 17-1 strikeout to walk rate in 16 innings this season. He's 36, 37 years old now, something like that. He's had trouble staying healthy, but he can still really pitch when he's been on the mound. So I have no concerns about performance. I think he's still a very good reliever. Like I said, it might just be another week or so that he's at the top of the saves pecking order for the Dodgers, but that makes him a pretty solid start for the upcoming week. So I'd be willing to at least go 3 or 4. Will that be enough for the 1 week fill-in? I don't know that I would want to go too much higher than that.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to go too much higher either, because I don't think you're buying a long-term closer here, and you're not necessarily even buying the short-term closer. You're buying the short-term lead option. So
Right.
What if there are only 3 chances while Phillips is gone, and it just so happens that Hudson only gets 1 of them? That would only be 1 less than expected, right? So I wouldn't be going too high, although I would mention that in leagues where you can care about things other than just saves for your relievers, those leagues where you have to roster 5 of them at all times, or leagues where holds matter as well, Hudson's a good pitcher. And so a good pitcher who's getting some saves, I would be all over in those leagues. Just like Yennier Cano, who is in a pretty similar spot here. The guy he's behind, Craig Kimbrell, is not hurt. He's just, pitching like Craig Kimbrell tends to for at least a month out of each of the last 5 seasons or so. Craig Kimbrell's kind of got the Tanner Scott, Jose Leclerc disease lately, where he just walks so many guys that even though he looks like a closer for 3 months of the year, he just does not look like the closer for all 6. And it's been a long time since he actually has. Cano is probably the guy to get if you're getting 1, and this is after I told you to take him off the outline last week. I'm apologizing for that again and stealing him this week. So just really, really clever moves here by me. But just want to note the last 6 saves by the Orioles. They went to Danny Colome, Jacob Webb. Then it went Craig Kimbrell did get 1. Then it was Yennier Cano. And then back to Jacob Webb, and then back to Yennier Cano. So Cano is the guy I put on here because he got 2 of the last 3. But, Webb has 2 of the last 5. So if you want to go Webb as well, it's just, I guess the question here is any of these guys going to be a closer until Kimbrell deserves the job again? Or is it just going to be they spread the saves around like they have been for the last week or so? And I kind of would be leaning that way, which is why I don't think I'd go much more than 2 or 3% on Cano, but this team's so good, just like the Dodgers, that you could get, a handful of saves for your troubles, I think, with Cano.
Right. Yeah. I think I would probably be willing to prioritize Cano over like a Daniel Hudson.
Yeah.
Just for the fact that he at least has that potential avenue to be the top closer for a really good team. Unlike Hudson, Evan Phillips is so good that he's definitely going to get that job back. Kimbrell pitched in the 7th inning yesterday.
Yeah.
Definitely easing him back into high leverage situations. I do think he'll probably eventually get the job back. It's like you mentioned, like he just goes through these waves that, like, he's still mostly a really good pitcher, I think, but he just has stretches where his control just completely evaporates and he just you can't trust him in those high leverage situations. So I think he'll probably get the job back. I'm still waiting for the Orioles at the deadline to trade for Mason Miller. So this is all going to be a moot point eventually, but
it's going to be Mason Miller and not your Ryan Helsley.
Yeah, could be Helsley as well.
Let's get in a quick message from Vivid Seats before I ask you about your favorite budget pitchers who we've got up next. And by Vivid Seats, I actually mean home run forecast. Apologies there. We've got new ads for a new month. Can certain weather conditions lead to more home runs? The atmosphere can affect how far a baseball flies by 20%. A home run forecast measures the weather conditions at a ballpark to tell us if the atmosphere is good or bad for ball flight during a game. An index value that rates the air is created for each game and ballpark and is displayed on a scale from 1 to 10. Home Run Forecast premium site offers index values by the hour for each game, 24-hour forecasts, wind direction, and speed, and even whether the roof will be open at certain stadiums. Home Run Forecast is offering a special for the start of the baseball season. You can get access to the premium site for the entire season for only $28, a savings of nearly 30%. Go to homerunforecast.com/RotoWire now to sign up. Back here on the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. Moving on to our budget pitchers. Who is the first budget pitcher that you're interested in this week, Ryan?
Jose Urquidy on the comeback trail. He's going to make a rehab start Sunday, coming back from a forearm injury. They say he's going to throw 60, 65 pitches. It surprised me a little bit that they were going to give him that many in his first rehab start back, which means, he'll probably make another one after that, but that seemingly should be enough to get him stretched out enough to rejoin the Astros rotation. Really struggled last year while battling a shoulder issue, but pre-2023, 3.74 ERA and 1.09 WHIP, 281.72 strikeout to walk rate in 342 innings. This is more of a floor play than a ceiling play. He's not going to miss a ton of bats, but Urquidy throws a lot of strikes. He's usually a pretty good whip option. So I think as long as he's healthy and theoretically he should have a decent offense backing him, although the Astros are obviously not playing great ball these days. But Urquidy should get those starts, as many as they'll give him. And again, more of a floor play than a ceiling play. Not going to miss a ton of bats, but he should get some wins, should give you a respectable ERA and whip. So if you're looking for a budget buy, kind of a quote-unquote sneaky stash right now when nobody's thinking about rostering him yet, I think he's a perfectly solid deep league option.
Yeah, I like that idea. Perfectly solid is as high as I would go, but I'm willing to go there for sure. My first budget pitcher here is Mason Black. And there's a chance that this is incorrect. If he has a bad outing tonight against Cincinnati Reds, he will probably not be on the roster anymore. I think that's a reasonable guess. He's only in the rotation now because Blake Snell hit the IL, and Snell is starting a rehab assignment. So it's possible that Black's days are numbered. But if he gets another start next week, it's lining up to be home versus Colorado. So I'd be pretty interested there. And then, hey, after that, at Pittsburgh. So there's potential here for Mason Black, and I would like to sneak in that potential. And I think if he has a medium start against Cincinnati, or even a pretty good one, you're still going to be able to get Mason Black at affordable prices, because he didn't look great in his MLB debut against the Phillies, although he actually was good. He was good for the first 4 innings and then was beaten up a bit in the 5th inning, ended up with 5 earned runs in 4 1/3 innings. But the Giants hadn't really pushed him that deep in the past. It was weird. They asked him to go deeper than he had in the minors in his major league debut. So that was never really going to go well against the lineup like the Phillies. Black is a legitimate prospect. He's below Robert Gasser on James's prospect rankings here. I believe Black is at 183. Gasser was at 130. And again, if we're just looking at the pitchers who are debuting this season, I said Gasser was the 15th rated out of those, and Mason Black the 23rd. So below Gasser, but actually not, by miles. And so if Black had a strong first start and a clearer path to the rotation, we'd be talking much more excitedly about Mason Black. And as has mentioned here by Uncle Ted, Keaton Wynn has been blasted back-to-back. So there's a chance that if Black outperforms Wynn, Black could be in the rotation to stay. This is, again, a pretty decent prospect who has a real shot at a rotation spot in a great pitcher's park. So I don't think you have to put Mason Black as a priority option, but I think there's a real chance that, again, assuming he is still in the rotation after today, I think you might want him.
Yep, Mason Black, a good prospect. I'm going to give you a very, very good prospect who does not have a rotation spot yet, but I think it might be time to stash Cade Horton now. Just recently promoted to AAA Iowa. On the season, he's got a 1.77 ERA at 24-6 strikeout to walk rate in 20 1/3 innings. Since entering the Cubs minor league system, 2.48 ERA, 1 WHIP, 32.9%, strikeout rate just a 7.7% walk rate. Cubs have been relatively careful with his workloads in the minors. This is a guy who really blossomed late in the college baseball season with Oklahoma, I believe. Really kind of his coming out party was like during the College World Series, basically, right before that. And then he wound up being picked in the first round, and some people question that pick, but then it's looking like it's a really good pick because he's now one of the better pitching prospects in baseball. I mean, he might be a tick below Paul Skeens, certainly, but he's right in that next tier with just unbelievable stuff. I do think he's going to have a pretty good chance to join the Cubs rotation, maybe not sooner rather than later, but soon enough to where if you want to throw a couple dollars on him and stash him now, I think now is probably the time, particularly in a deeper league, because he's going to be rostered in a lot of the deep leagues already, probably. But if he is still out there, I think now is the time to stash him.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I attempted to stash him in the RotoWire Stake League this week, but James Anderson, who knows a thing or two about stashing prospects, he outbid me for him. And so if James is stashing him this week, I think it's time to stash him this week. He is James's 17th overall prospect and the third best on that list of pitchers debuting this year. So this is the kind of player who, in leagues where you can't stash minor leaguers, he's going to be getting those 20%, 30% bids when he does eventually arrive. I think that the Cubs have more than enough options who are okay-ish that they're not going to call him up just when they have a need, and they've made that clear so far given their usage. But eventually the Hayden Wesneskis and Ben Browns of the world aren't going to stand in Cade Horton's way when he's ready to go. My next starting pitcher here is Bryce Wilson, and there was a call much earlier in the comments that Bryce Wilson should be in the previous section as the number one starting pitcher. I'm not going that far. I think this is still Bryce Wilson we're talking about, but it is notable that the Brewers, when they called up Robert Gasser, it was not Bryce Wilson going back to the bullpen. It was Tobias Myers going back to the minors. So Bryce Wilson seems to have established himself. It's only 4 starts this year, but he's a guy that the Brewers certainly seem to be thinking of as a future rotation option. Don't want to get remotely ahead of myself, given that we've seen him as a starter. The first 5 years of his career, he was mostly a starter, and he had a 5.54 ERA. But he also got called up in his age 20 season. He was a few years too early. If he didn't get his debut until 2022 or something, then we'd be looking at one bad year and then a year last year in which he pitched quite well in the bullpen. So I think there's a chance that Bryce Wilson in his age 26 season is starting to put things together, using some lessons that he picked up in the bullpen, and is going to have a solid rotation spot as a decent back-end starter. I would not go at all crazy for him, but I think that he is probably up to serviceable starter levels when I definitely did not expect to be saying that about Bryce Wilson at any point this season.
I'm going Alex Vesia next. Back to that Dodgers bullpen. Should mention Blake Trinan as well.
Yeah,
I had kind of honestly written Trinan off just because he'd missed so much time. I wasn't sure that he was going to be able to rediscover that filthy stuff, but he's actually looked surprisingly great so far since coming back. So keep him in mind as well. But Vesia did get that first save post Evan Williams IL stunt. Hey, he's got a 1.56 ERA, 20 to 12 strikeout to walk rate in 17 and a third innings so far this season. Career strikeout rate of 31.6%. So he's their best left-handed reliever. When the opposition has lefties due up in the ninth, maybe you can squeeze out another save or two this upcoming week. I don't think you're going to need to bid any more than one or two, and I wouldn't want to bid more than that, but maybe you can get Vesia for a very cheap FAAB bid, and he can get you a save. And in a deeper league, he's probably going to be a solid option anyway, even if he's not getting those saves.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely like Alec Vesia as a down option, a down waterfall option, whatever the right word is. I want him somewhere in there if I don't get a preferred target. Same can be said for Griffin Jax. I threw him on here. He's actually still available in just over, or probably re-available in just over half of TGFBI leagues. He just got a save last night for the Twins, which means that the Twins' last 4 saves have all gone to different players. Cole Sands, Caleb Thielbar, Joanne Duran, and Griffin Jax, which is significant because Duran was already back over that stretch. He had the 2 saves right before that. So the Twins really aren't using Duran as anything particularly close to a traditional closer. I would still, for any given save, pick Duran as the most likely guy to get it. But if you had Duran as a, leader of a committee who gets 75% of the saves, it really might be more like 50%, which means there's a pretty meaningful number for Griffin Jax, who has great numbers everywhere but his saves. 3.06 ERA, 31% strikeout rate. And the ERA estimators are all sitting in the 2s, some even in the low 2s. So Griffin Jax, a very solid reliever who gets some saves. That's actually not that different from what Joanne Duran is right now. Duran has a very solid reliever who gets some saves. Theoretically, again, Duran gets more than half of the saves, but I think the gap between the two of them, for fantasy purposes only, if Jax is going to be, the second best save option, I think there's still plenty of teams where Jax is at least the 9th best pitcher on your roster.
Yeah, as someone who took advantage of Yohan Duran falling in drafts after that oblique strain, I'm hoping Rocco Baldelli changes his mind and goes back to a more traditional closer situation, but don't know that we can count on that happening. And Griffin Jax is certainly worthy of being rostered in deeper leagues because of that fact.
All right, and let's move on to the budget hitters here to wrap things off. And I'll kick it off with Johnny DeLuca, who I actually considered throwing in the priority FAAB buys section this week. I'm not sure how you view him, so maybe we do actually want to give a number for him. Most of the guys in this budget section, we assume 1%, maybe 2%. But Johnny DeLuca, the biggest issue with any Ray, is that we're not sure how much they're going to play. The Rays are full of players who are pretty good and who play 4 times a week. But Johnny DeLuca has been playing every day since making his season debut. He came over in the Tyler Glasnow trade. I had done very little with the Dodgers, but that's partially just because he was on the Dodgers. You got to fight through some really talented players to get time with the Dodgers. With the Rays, he was expected actually to earn an opening day roster spot, but then he broke his hand in mid-March. So it took until this past week for him to get called up. Made his season debut on May 3rd, so I guess technically a little bit more than this past week. And he's been performing well, but the most important thing, I think, is just that he's playing. He's a decent prospect and not a huge one. That's why I didn't throw him earlier, but maybe I should have. 2 steals and a homer already while hitting .292 in his first 7 games. Not sure exactly where the performance is going to settle, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to settle as more than good enough to roster him. And if the playing time's there too, suddenly this is quite an exciting player.
Yeah, I've been playing. I figured he would seem like going into the season before he got hurt, as you mentioned. They had him pegged for a kind of a lefty masher specialist role, but he's been playing against righties as well. I think they've kind of soured on Jose Siri. He's just striking out at gone from a bad rate to just a untenable rate. So I know they like Johnny DeLuca. He's got some power. He's got some speed. So certainly intriguing. I I'm with you. I think it could have been justifiable for sure putting him in the first section. So if he's available in your deeper leagues, I'm definitely down for
4,
that.
5, 6%, something like that.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, yeah, sounds reasonable to me.
John Singleton. I didn't think I'd be talking about John Singleton in the year of our Lord 2024. Obviously an atypical career arc, 8 years in between major league stints for John Singleton, but it's been him and not Joey Loperfido at first base for the Astros since Jose Abreu went into purgatory. 10 straight starts at first base for John Singleton. He had 8th in his first of those 10 starts. His last 3 starts have been in the 5th spot in the Astros lineup. Over those 10 games, 884 OPS, 4 home runs, 10 RBIs. He doesn't have any issues with left-handed pitching, no splits. I think he's actually done better against lefties than righties this year. He's always had a really good eye, always drawn a ton of walks. That was one of his best qualities when he was a prospect so many moons ago. And he has power as well. I don't know if you guys caught the clip of that home run he hit at Yankee Stadium, I believe on Thursday, but he hit it where very few people hit balls at Yankee Stadium. So legitimate power. I mean, it's impossible to say whether John Singleton has real staying power. I mean, odds are he probably does not, but he's getting regular at bats and is showing power and patience at first base for a team that should be in the upswing at some point. And it doesn't seem like there's another first base solution on the horizon right away for the Astros. So I think they're going to give Singleton some run. So certainly in deeper leagues, he absolutely should be rostered at deeper mixed formats. Not your shallower leagues, but I know in one league in particular, I've already put in an early FAAB bid for him when I'm needing some corner infield help. So don't know if he's got any staying power for sure, but I think he's interesting enough in this bizarre career arc that he could actually be useful.
Yeah, not a reliable option, not one I would expect to still have on my team in August or September, but you might. Sure. And like you said, it's not just decent on the surface. He is actually performing well. He's a 32-year-old who's never performed well before, but he's legitimately performing pretty well now. So there's certainly some teams where he will be a useful addition. I'll go with Abraham Toro as my next budget hitter here. Abraham Toro is still just himself. He's a light-hitting utility guy, but not that light-hitting. So he continues to get work either as a bench player for a bad team or as a as a bench player for a good team or a starter for a bad one. And that's where he is now. He's playing for Oakland. He's playing quite a lot. He's started, looks like 10 straight games at second base. He had to start the day before that too at first base. So it's at least 11 straight starts here for Toro. Point is, he's playing all the time right now, and he's playing well. He's got a 289 batting average, a 783 OPS on the season. Doesn't hit the ball all that hard. And by all that hard, I mean not hard at all. A 28% hard hit rate is bad. 3 home runs, despite that, is a surprise. And I would not expect more than 10 to 12 homers by season's end necessarily. But he makes a lot of contact. 17% strikeout rate is good. So if you want somebody who's just going to be in the lineup a lot and is going to put the ball in play a lot, and he may even be eligible at both second and third base, I believe, in many leagues. If that's the case for you, he's a useful player. He's made 13 appearances at second and 10 appearances at third this year, so he should be eligible at both those spots. So a corner/middle guy who plays and hits the ball, that's useful. Don't go crazy at all, but there's not a lot of options in deeper leagues, especially in the middle spot. So Abraham Toro, completely adequate.
My next guy is Nick Gonzalez. Obviously the former first-round pick of the Pirates, who has drawn so much buzz for being promoted this weekend, right?
Yeah, sounds right.
Looks like he's probably going to be a regular at second base for now. Jared Triolo has not performed. Also could see a little action at shortstop against lefties if they want to give O'Neal Cruz a day off during those days. Batted fifth in his first game. I think he might have hit sixth today for the Pirates. Was hitting awesome at AAA Indianapolis. 358, 431, 608. 4 home runs and 14 doubles at AAA. As I mentioned, former number 7 overall pick in the 2020 draft. And he was basically just a hit tool and nothing else. Doesn't have a ton of power, but potential double-digit power, a little bit of speed, not a ton of speed. But the hit tool is what he's mostly known for, and hopefully that's taken strides this year. He's still quite young and going to get some regular reps for the Pirates right now. There's definitely pedigree there. Deeper league, give Nick Gonzalez a shot.
Yeah, worth a look for sure. I will wrap things up with Dayron Blanco, who is only going to be useful in some leagues. Certainly, it needs to be a roto league where steals matter because he has 10 of those in 26 games. He also has 10 of those in 38 plate appearances because a whole bunch of his games are just pinch running defensive replacement sort of opportunities. So you can see the kind of speed he has, though. Again, 10 steals in 38 plate appearances. That's more than a quarter, right? If he had 600 plate appearances, that's on pace for more than 150 steals. And now a player like him is never going to get anywhere close to 600 plate appearances, but the Royals do seem to be giving him a few more opportunities. He started back-to-back games heading into today's show, although I believe he is on the bench today. He's hitting the ball in his very limited playing time, 38 plate appearances. But he was hitting the ball last year, too. And actually, now for his career, he's up to 183 plate appearances. He's got a 109 WRC+, about a league average strikeout rate, 7.4% barrel rate for his career. The bat might actually not be that bad for Dayron Blanco. He's a 31-year-old who's never actually been able to be anything more than the part-timer he is now. So definitely don't get carried away here. But I am treating those 2 starts this week as meaningful. And if he continues to get more playing time, again, we're talking about someone who steals at more than 150 bases per season clip if he actually was a 600 plate appearance player. So if we can just get him up to 3-4 starts a week, suddenly he's, stealing as many bases as anybody. So I think we have to keep an eye on Dayron Blanco's playing time, and any more uptick, suddenly we get very excited. So I think in deep leagues, try to get him now and see if this leads anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, he might be Terrence Gore, but I think there's a better chance that he can actually hit a little bit to not just be Terrence Gore and be a defensive replacement pinch runner extraordinaire. So, yeah, definitely keep an eye on that playing time. Hunter Renfroe shouldn't be a huge stumbling block at this point in his career. So if Dayron Blanco does get those extra reps, I mean, if he gets on, he's certainly going to be running.
Yeah, Terrence Gore, just for comparison, he had 85 plate appearances spread across 8 seasons, and he had a 61 WRC+. So he never showed any ability to hit, whereas Dayron Blanco, I mean, he's shown an above average bat technically in very limited action. So I would be interested in him anywhere where a guy who barely plays but has good speed is an option. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you to our sponsor, Prize Picks. I'll be back tomorrow with my guest, Dave McDonald, talking about some tough drop decisions. Right back tomorrow and all week on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast.